the code of the pandemic times and holiday shopping. Also of note, our last day of wrapping is December 11th because of that as well. So again, shop local, shop early.
And a quick logistical note, we are recording this evening's event for future broadcast on our YouTube channel. You will not be part of the recording as long as you stay muted, which is why we're asking you to ask your questions in the chat. Only those of us speaking with this lovely yellow box around us will be part of that recording. So you don't need to worry about that, but the event is being recorded for YouTube broadcast later on. And then I believe that Dafydd has the introduction ready to introduce our guest authors this evening.
I do. It is my great pleasure to welcome Brother Christopher of the Monks of New Skete and Marc Goldberg to Northshire Live for this event for their new book, The Art of Training Your Dog. Brother Christopher is the head of the dog training program, the prior at their monastery, and the principal writer of their popular books like The Art of Raising a Puppy, How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, and more. Marc Goldberg is a certified dog trainer and a past president of the International Association of Canine Professionals. Marc and Brother Christopher both first collaborated on the book, Let Dogs Be Dogs. Their new book, it's The Art of Training Your Dog, How to Gently Teach Good Behavior Using an E-Collar. Please welcome to Northshire Live, Marc Goldberg and Brother Christopher.
Thank you so much for having us, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel and Dafydd. It's an honor for us to be here and to have the opportunity to talk with all our guests and explain what our new book is about, answer questions, and have a conversation. We're delighted to be here.
Well, I think you wanted us to start out, guys, with a little bit of an introduction to what this book is all about. But I think maybe for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, maybe we should introduce one another. So I'm going to start by introducing my cohort, my colleague, my co-author, Brother Christopher. And Brother Christopher, the New Skete Monastery is located in Cambridge, New York. And you folks have been training dogs, breeding German Shepherds, and writing about them for something like 40 years. Mm-hmm. So maybe give the people the quick version of how the monks got started in dogs and books, because it's kind of an unusual story, isn't it?
Sure. We had, when the monastery began, we had a mascot named Kier, who was very important to us. And when Kier passed away, the brothers felt that loss so much that they obtained 2 breeding quality German Shepherds. And at the time, the brothers were living pretty much by hand to mouth. And so the breeder suggested that the brothers breed the dogs, and which we did, and wind up discovering that local friends were enchanted with the idea of adopting a puppy that was raised in a monastery, and that led to our breeding program. And naturally, when you get involved in a breeding program, you also have to make sure that the dogs that you're breeding are well trained, particularly since it's a monastery. And so from that, people would come and see the well-behaved dogs and sort of say, boy, I wish my dog would behave like this. And that led to creating a 3-week training program in basic training, where we would take dogs for 3 weeks. And that snowballed. Those 2 things, it basically stabilized the monastery's economy, but also established sort of a little bit of a notoriety that through the 70s in particular grew. And out of that, we had an editor from Little Brown have his dog trained at the monastery, and he was the one who suggested that we write a book about our vision and our philosophy of training, which turned into How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend. And lo and behold, that became surprisingly a bestseller to us. I mean, we were sort of surprised by it, but basically what it did is it launched the monastery into a territory and a life with dogs that when the monastery first began, we really didn't expect, but it's been an enormously important, and it's made us better monks working with dogs. So I'll just put it there. for right now and sort of turn the tables on, my co-author, who is more importantly my friend too. And I would like to just simply say that for the past 15 years, I've had the opportunity to both work with Marc, but also, like I said, get to know him as a friend. And what I found is not only is he extremely perceptive and knowledgeable about dogs, but he has a very real gift to communicate that and his wisdom. And so sort of out of our friendship, we've had the pleasure of creating a collaboration that I think both of us have had a lot of fun with, but also has been something that people have appreciated. So perhaps, Marc, what you could tell is perhaps a story of how you got involved in training dogs in the first place, since it's a pretty fascinating tale in its own right.
Well, I was a child bride to dog training in my own way. My father was a dog lover, my mother not so much. So it took a whole lot of begging and pleading, I would say from the time I was about 9 years old. So, but never stand in the way of a committed 11-year-old. And much to my fortune, my mother got pneumonia, but she didn't want to go to the hospital. She didn't want to be admitted because she didn't want us being, looked after by somebody else. So she stayed in her bed where I was in her ear every day. I want a dog. I want a dog. I want a dog. I want a dog. And I remember one day she just said to me, just let me sleep and I'll get you a dog. Can you imagine how relentless I would have been, right? So that led to my mother thankfully recovered. And that did lead to her keeping her promise. And I received a Sheltie puppy for my 11th birthday. And although we had some trials and tribulations along the way, that puppy, his name was Gus. I got him when I was 11, and he lived and was with me until I was almost 29 years old. Just about 29. So he took me from the innocence of childhood all the way up into adulthood. And what a lucky and wonderful thing that was for me. Now, when he was quite young, about 5 months of age, and he hit those teenage years where dogs quit following you around and doing everything they say, and they begin to exercise their own willpower. He ran into the street and got hit by a car. Now, I told you he lived to be, an old dog, but however, he did get banged up pretty good in that accident. And when we got him all patched up and healed and the cast came off and all like that, my mother did for me something that was just life altering. Because first she got me the dog, but the second life altering thing she did was she sent me and that dog to dog school. And I still remember her telling me, if you don't teach him to come when called, if you don't train him, he's going to get killed on that road. And so this was in the very early 70s by this point, maybe actually 1970, in fact, I think. And the era was different. I feel like people had more leisure time, and there were just things you did because you did them. And one of those things that responsible people did was they just enrolled their dog in dog training class. And so the classes were huge. And there must have been 25 or 30 people in this gym for this big class. And Gus and I won first prize. So I was bitten a little bit by the dog training bug. And to make a long story even longer, I was in, by this point, junior high school, and we had print shop. And while all the other kids were printing posters and fun things, I printed business cards for dog training. And before you know it, I was training dogs for my teachers professionally. And yeah, that was kind of how I got my start. But I've always been fascinated by dogs. And then, of course, to bring it all the way back around to the monks, right around 1978, 79, I read the first book that the monks wrote, which is still in print. It's still in hardcover, 500,000 copies later, called How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend. And that really drove home a lot of my own thoughts and desires for me, because at that point, dog training was about making dogs do things. That's what it was back in the early 70s, but the monks wrote about relationship with your dog and how training was meant to serve the relationship. And that just fascinated me. So I became a fan and a student of the monks ever since.
That's one of the things that I would simply riff on a little bit is the fact that when people say, how is it that you, a monk, are right now sort of co-author with a book on e-collar training? Okay, that's because most people perhaps who are not necessarily current with technological changes in dog training just simply assume that e-collars are punitive and harsh types of things. And the short answer to that is through my own experience, primarily initially with Marc, but then also in my own experience, what I have found is the e-collar has become an effective tool precisely because of its subtlety in helping to, as it were, educate a dog, to nourish the relationship in ways that, from my own experience as a dog trainer, I realized were sort of unique and exceptional. I mean, often, so many of the clients I've worked with throughout the years have struggled to be able to really include their dogs in their lives in the way that they dream about. So many people who would love to be able to, for example, take a nature hike with their dogs off leash and feel safe about that. This particular type of approach to training in a very gentle and in a very humane way has sort of opened that possibility for so many of our clients. And it has really enhanced the quality of their relationship with their dogs. It has allowed the dogs to enjoy their lives that much more because dogs by nature being social want to be included in their owners' lives. And so it's been sort of out of a recognition of how revolutionary and how affirming this tool can be to a relationship between owner and dog, that we just saw the real crying need for a book that gave a comprehensive treatment about this in a way that would both reassure people, but also give a step-by-step guide of how to use such a tool effectively.
And in fact, we really want to start with the following concept. Not all e-collars are created equal. You know, if you just Google the term, you are going to find thousands of options. And these tools range from $29 to hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And how is the consumer to know which is a collar capable of gentle training? Because they aren't all. So that's the first thing that we wanted to start with, was a thorough and a nuanced discussion about what makes a good e-collar. And of course, we do discuss that thoroughly in the Art of Training Your Dog, so that you know how to select a tool that can be used very gently on your dog. But I'll put it to you like this. You should be able to put the kind of equipment that we use in your hand or on your arm, and you should be able to push the button over and over and over and over again and feel it a little bit, but not be disturbed or ouchy or worried. And so let's start with the premise of this. This is something that you could feel on yourself and not be concerned about at all. And not all equipment is created the same. So that's the first thing that we wanted to discuss, was what makes for a good e-collar. And then secondly, of course, is how do you use it? Because here's the thing, the genie is out of the bottle. I mean, the genie is out of the bottle. Our statistics show that approximately 1 million e-collars are being sold per year now. And they're being sold online, in big box stores, in pet stores. E-collars are jumping out of the woodwork. People are buying them left, right, and center. The problem, of course, is they don't come with really very thorough directions. Both Brother Christopher and I have had this experience over and over and over again. A client comes to our boarding training and drops off the dog and drops off an e-collar along with the dog, sometimes a good one, sometimes one that makes us shudder, that we don't want to look at. And they say, we don't know how to use it, but see if you can figure this out. So we have figured this out over the course of years, and we will explain to you, if you would like to train your dog through off-leash reliability in as little as 6 weeks. We're going to help you do that without freaking yourself out or your dog. This is gentle and good stuff when you know what you're doing.
Mark, there's a question that I got from Eric in the chat asking about specific types and brands of e-collars and what you recommend sort of more specifically in those.
Well, excuse me, I think we should probably avoid mentioning all the brands on the air right now, but let's just say there are some features that you should look for that are unique to a handful of good brands that have spent a lot of money on research and development to do this correctly. And we even show pictures of them in the book. But look, here's what you should be looking for. We want a collar that features a minimum of 15 levels, a minimum of 15 levels. And in fact, some of the better collars that we use go up to 100 or 127 levels even, which sounds like a lot. Why so many levels? Is that mean? Is it just because it gets mean? The answer is no. It's because from low to high, the more we subdivide that, the better. What we're looking for is something very subtle. Brother Christopher and I prefer rheostatic action where you're twirling a knob, but some of these collars have got buttons that allow you to, button up, level up, if you will. But in general, we like rheostats. So guys, here's the way that you can test an e-collar. It's a simple test so that you can test an e-collar to see if it's good enough for your dog. And what you do is you put it on your own self and you start pushing the button on level 1. You shouldn't really be able to feel it on level 1. Go to the next level. You shouldn't be able to feel it, or you should barely be able to feel it. And you should be able to travel through numerous levels before finally you feel a sensation that I would describe to be a tickle or a funny feeling or like a TENS unit if you've ever been to a doctor, but at the lowest, lightest levels. You'd have to question yourself, did I really feel it? If you go from level 1, I feel it a little, to level 2, ooh, I don't love that, to level 3, ow, I don't like that at all, put it back. That's not the collar for you. So there are a number of brands that accomplish this, but I'm afraid if I name a couple of them, I'll leave somebody out. But believe me, you can feel these things on your own hand, and it should be very non-troubling to you. Otherwise, put it back or return it.
One of the things that I would add to that is you can imagine the profile of owners who bring their dogs to the monastery. These are people who really love their dogs. They're very concerned that the dog be trained in a very gentle and compassionate way, at the same time in a way that holds the dog accountable to what it understands and knows. And one of the things that I'm really happy to say is all of our clients, when they actually not only experience what the sensation is in their own hand, but also see the results in their dog and how their own experience working with the dog has changed. We have been extremely gratified that at their enthusiasm and their own support. So, like I said, it's not like we're bringing in people who let's say, have real serious working dogs, and those dogs have to be, let's say, worked at a very, very high level of, sort of intensity. No, we take in dogs of all sorts, but what sort of the common denominator is that the basic owner profile that comes here to the monastery is what you would call a very concerned, compassionate, and responsible owner. And they've been so satisfied with the results that they've experienced using this tool.
I think that's in part because of the way we use it. I mean, first of all, you need good technology. So yeah, to the person who asked that question, we definitely want to help you identify what is a good e-collar, but then we also want to help teach you precisely how to use it. Good technology has existed for quite a while. The problem is methodology lagged behind, right? So just because there's a good tool available doesn't know anybody necessarily knew how to use it very well. I think the worst use of an e-collar is to just punish a dog, you know, to just take a behavior that you don't like and make it unpleasant so that the dog will stop doing it. Mind you, as dog trainers, Brother Christopher and I understand you do need the dog to quit bolting through the door and running away. You do need the dog to quit jumping on visitors. You do need the dog to quit digging up the carpet. We understand all of that. But if you start with just punishment, you're not really enhancing the relationship. You're not adding quality to your life. You're not adding quality to your dog's life. So, and not only that, by the way, if problem behaviors by and large are driven by boredom and frustration of a dog, right? So if you just squish this behavior, squish that behavior with an e-collar, well, not only is it unkind, but also too, you'll end up playing whack-a-mole with the behavior, because when you manage to squish one behavior, another one's going to come out because the dog is still frustrated and bored. We use the e-collar as a communication device. Think of it literally like this. You're walking along with a friend and your friend says, "Excuse me, I want to tell you something," which in our culture, our human North American culture, a tap on the shoulder means, "I want to tell you something." And so, of course, we do. We use body language, we use words. We barely even want to call them commands because we're really engaging the dog's desire to collaborate with his pack leader, which is you guys. So we're using the e-collar as a very light attention getter and teaching device. And if you progress it the right way, the dog gets trained without hardly even realizing it. Ultimately, this means you're spending quality time with your dog. And at the end of the day, the payoff is you can take your dog places, which is what they want. And that's what you want. And also, too, they're not so obnoxious and rambunctious when visitors come over. You don't have to lock them away when family comes around, and hopefully we'll be able to do all of that soon. Again, please. But so many dogs are locked into a bedroom or a crate when people come around, and that's because they don't know how to behave. So you really, what Brother Christopher and I are doing is we're trying to liberate the dog to enjoy a fuller life with you and your family, and that'll make everybody happy. And believe me, it's a lovely and a gentle thing.
That's interesting that Mark brings that up. I know one of the questions that sometimes people ask when they first contact us is, will training destroy the dog's spirit? And what we like to respond is that it has no intention of destroying the dog's spirit, but rather liberating that spirit, bringing it out in a way that both the dog and the owner really enjoy. That's what is sort of characteristic about our approach, our emphasis on the relationship. And in the book, one of the things that readers will notice right from the get-go, we have the second half of the book is a comprehensive lesson plan, okay, that is composed of 16 lessons that owners can go through with their dogs. And they'll notice that we start using the collar very, very early on in the training process. So unlike some of the approaches of other people in terms of using an e-collar, where they layer it on after the dog has been trained in a more conventional way, we start right at the beginning of the process, but in a very, very gentle, low-level way where the dog becomes as it were, very accustomed to the meaning of the particular stim that is being administered. And as Mark said, to understand it, it's like a little bit of a tap on the shoulder. It's not anything egregious or over the top at all, okay?
Brother Christopher and I are both older guys. And the advantage there is we've gotten to see a little bit of dog training history. And here's one thing I know we can agree on, Brother Christopher, and that is before e-collars were good, and there was a time when neither of us would use them because they just weren't good. And you couldn't be subtle with them. You couldn't be artistic. You couldn't be elegant. You couldn't be nice, okay? So we didn't use them. But back in those days, to teach the dogs to recall, meaning come when called, off of squirrels or other distractions so people could really take their dogs out into nature and enjoy them. Boy, it took like 6 months. And because of that, the average client dog really never got there because, you know, the average client wasn't going to spend 6 months working with a trainer to achieve that. I got it on my dogs decades and decades ago, but most average people never did. And unfortunately, so many dogs, you know, would get lost or hit by cars that way. But we're producing dogs who come when called off of high-level distractions very happily now in 3 weeks. So when we say we've given you a 6-week program, we had to slow it down a little bit because we know you're not doing this every day. But Brother Christopher and I do it in about 3 weeks. So it's really a freedom, kind of it's a freedom for dogs that you can. That it's a gift for dogs, the gift of freedom. They all want it. Now, a lot of people ask, it's a very common question, when can I start? When can I dig in with my dog on this stuff? And so I would address that in 2 ways. First, the Monks of New Skete wrote a beautiful book called The Art of Raising a Puppy. And that book is really, it's an encyclopedia of pretty much everything you would need to know about how to get through those critical first months, the first year really of life of your dog. But the art of training your dog now picks up and presumes that your puppy is about 5 months of age. So the average puppy will be ready at about 5 months of age to start this. You want to add anything to that, Chris, about age?
No, I think that naturally here at the monastery, we usually take dogs in at 6 to 7 months of age, but that's because they're going to be separated from their owners for 2.5 weeks. And we sort of prefer to have the bond between dog and owner pretty well established before it comes to boarding school. But in terms of actually being able to work with an e-collar in the way that we're suggesting, we don't have any disagreement. You know, a dog that is five months of age can be started on the program that we outline, and you'll see some really very wonderful results following the guidelines that we're offering.
Now we, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt, but we do have audience questions when you have a moment.
Of course. Well, we want to get to those. I want to add this one caveat, and we do discuss the age and maturity level of training puppies in the 5 month and up range in the art of training your dog. And so I'll call it out here. One of the things that we say is puppies tend to get tired quicker than older dogs, right? So if you're training a 20-week-old puppy and she was doing well for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then she starts to get silly and roll around on the ground and it looks like she's getting tired or throwing a tantrum and she wants to quit. Well, you know, try and leave them wanting more rather than less, right? So if your puppy gets tired, it's fine. Just put her up for a snack in her crate or a bone or a relaxation period of time. Puppies have shorter attention spans. This form of training allows for that. Our average lesson ranges from 3 to 15 or 20 minutes. It's not hours of drilling. It's quick snips of time. And so that takes into account puppies with shorter attention spans. But if you're training a younger dog and she gets tired, be sure to put her up for a little while and let her recuperate and relax.
So there's a question, a fairly technical one from Joe. First of all, he says, thank you for your books. I trained with Mary M and she recommended your book as part of our training. He says that he has an ET300 Mini. Can you explain the best way to use the different settings?
Well, so that collar is sometimes called the Mini Educator. It's a model 300. It's from a company called eCollar Technologies. It's one of the is one of the e-collars that we do recommend in the book, because it's one that we work with regularly. There are a few other brands that we like as well, but that's one of them. And okay, so how to use it? Well, yeah, we go through that very thoroughly in the book, but I'll give you a quick recap of it here. It's got 3 buttons that do 3 different things to the collar. The first button is a vibration button. And so it vibrates the collar the same way your cell phone would vibrate if someone called you, but your phone was set to silent. Most people seem to love the idea of using vibration because the average human being never had a great relationship with electricity. Not if we could feel it. Okay. We don't like the idea. Vibration we're used to because of our phones, but I could tell you from personal experience, and I think Brother Christopher will back me up on this, the average dog is mildly terrified of vibration. Right. Don't you think, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes I find that dogs respond much more willingly and positively with a mild stim as opposed to the vibration.
Yeah, because the vibration is not subtle. Now, that leaves 2 other buttons on that particular model. They're both electrical, if you will. And one of them is a momentary button and the other is a constant button. We tend to use the constant button more. That's the red button. And if you're looking for a number, Joe, listen, that's going to vary. That collar, by the way, guys, it has an LED readout. It goes from 0 to 100 in terms of like electrical output. I first begin to feel it myself at about 9 or 10. Brother Christopher, you don't feel it until what, like 15?
13 or 14 at the earliest, yeah.
So we're both a little different. So I am the dog who, if you wanted to say, excuse me, Mark, I need to tell you something, I would respond to you on 8. But Brother Christopher wouldn't feel 8. He would respond at 13 or 14. Mm-hmm. If you give me 13 or 14, I'm going to worry. I'm not going to like it. So we also talk in the art of training your dog about how to find the level that your dog will respond to without being worried or disturbed.
That's right. That's one of the things that's so important that goes along with this type of training is reading your dog's body language, because your dog is going to be utterly truthful and transparent. That's one of the wonderful things about dogs. They don't deceive. And so in working with the dog, for example, and you see, let's say, a dog that is not having in any kind of a way a forced reaction, but for example, if you're tapping it on the shoulder and it simply turns its head, you know that the dog is, first of all, you've obtained its attention, but you've done so in a way that is elegant, okay? In a way that is not domineering, as it were. And so one of the things that we're continually talking about in the book is how to sort of elicit that sort of attention from your dog in the training process. And it has the bonus of sensitizing you to your dog's body language in a broader way than I think would otherwise be the case.
And because e-collars feature levels, at least 15 levels and as many as 127 levels, because of that, we wrote an entire chapter about levels in the book, because we really want people to understand exactly what you're doing so that so that you don't have to worry about overwhelming your dog. We don't want to scare you or your dog. So there's a lot of information there to help you. If I may, we put together a website at theartoftrainingyourdog.com. And from there, you can navigate to our Facebook group. And if you purchase the book, particularly through Northshire, which we would appreciate, that you sell the book, don't you guys? I thought you did. So you can order the book through Northshire. And then you can navigate through to the website at theartoftrainingyourdog.com. And from there, you can go to our Facebook group, which is The Art of Training Your Dog with an E-Collar. And we are a group of dog trainers there, and myself included, and Brother Christopher's assistant Ida is an administrator of that group also, and we're there to help answer questions. So this is kind of a unique thing. It's a book. It's a standalone book, has 205 pictures and a lot of descriptions and lessons to help you do this yourself. But if you would like help, if you want to talk to other people about your dog and theirs, well, we are there for you right on Facebook.
One of the things that I would simply add to that, that people are going to find helpful about the book, is we do have an appendix in the book that covers, shall we say, about 50 to 60 common problems that owners face with their dogs, and how to use this particular training approach to deal with those problems in a very constructive way.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because when people come to me at chicagodogtrainer.com or Brother Christopher at newskete.org to get training, what happens is they say one of two things. I would love a beautifully trained dog, please. And that happens like maybe 1 out of 100 times. The other 99 people come along with a dog and say, she's jumping, she's biting, she's knocking the kids over, she's eating the garbage. She won't come in when I call her. She's eating off of the counter. She's begging, please make it stop. So people come with a funny and long list of doggy problems. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to cover all of those. We didn't want to start with them, because if you train your dog, most of them are going to disappear, or at least sharply reduce in intensity. But that being said, we definitely wanted to cover them. So in the appendix, as Brother Christopher said, is a list of a whole bunch of dog problems, from, digging holes in the yard to eating the garbage, marking in the house, jumping, anything you could think of, it's in there. And we tell you how to fix it. We think that's part and parcel of what we want to deliver, is freedom from all the nonsense.
But behold the ultimate truth. One of the things that both of us absolutely agree, and we speak and remind people repeatedly in the book, is that it is to the owner's advantage not to take shortcuts and simply go first to the appendix and try and solve the particular problem that they're having with their dog. They'll be so much more successful, and it'll be so much better for their own relationship if they establish a proper foundation first, from which then they can communicate meaningfully to their dog when the dog is doing something that they don't want or is displeasing. It's a much, much better approach than simply going to the appendix and saying, here, my dog is counter surfing. This is how I'll deal with it.
Well, guys, you heard it from a monk. No cheating. Read the book first.
I've got a question here from Mary. She's got a recent, as in about 2 months ago, a new rescue who is, she thinks, mostly black lab with possibly some shepherd, who's 2 years old and has a scarred neck from an ingrown collar. It doesn't bother him, but what she's wondering is if an e-collar would be appropriate. He's a gentle soul and learning quickly, but doesn't come when she calls him consistently. Or doesn't call consistently when she calls him, sorry.
Yeah, understood. Well, listen, how unfortunate that that somebody would do that to a dog, that a collar in bed. That's just a straight up case of neglect. And neglect like that is it's a shame. So your dog is very lucky that he's in a loving home now. So look, we're going to make the assumption that your dog's neck is healed. Sounds like he's got some scars, but the key point is that let's make sure that he stays safe and sound. And the recall is probably the single most important thing that any of us can teach our dogs, because it's what keeps them safe when they flip into prey drive. They see a squirrel, they want to run into the street, And boy, all of us have known somebody who lost a dog that way. And I myself, with my very first dog, the entire reason I became a dog trainer was my little dog, Gus, my beautiful little Sheltie, ran into the street because why? He didn't come when I called. Now, I was 11. I didn't know about leashes. I didn't know about recall. I didn't know about dog training. I didn't know anything. But I do know that I watched my dog get hit by a Volkswagen, and I don't want anybody else. I don't want any other child to lose their dog like that ever again. So can you put an e-collar on your dog? Absolutely, you can.
Yeah.
The key point is gentle training that involves, lots of love and a really coherent, gentle approach. We do have that for you, but certainly you can do that.
And you'll also associate in the training process high value food rewards, food reinforcement as part of it, so that the dog can make a positive connection. Now, we don't, as it were, get the dog addicted to treats. We gradually encourage owners to make treats more and more sporadic once the dog has understood the particular commands. And we do that in a way so that the dog will wonder, for example, on a long distance recall, might now be the time when I'm going to get my favorite cookie or something like that. So it's what we're trying to do is make the training process a very enjoyable process for both dog and owner. I mean, there's nothing so dispiriting as working a dog in training who looks as though it's just carrying a white flag saying, come on, just get me out of this. That's no fun. It's no fun for the owner either. Yeah. What you really want is when you're working with a dog, the dog is strutting, the dog's happy, the dog's looking at you, there's eye contact, there's basically the cooperation that's going on between dog and owner exemplifies the dynamic of the relationship. And when you see that, boy, it is just a game changer. It's the type of thing that we all dream about, we love, and our dogs enjoy it too.
By the way, if we sound like true believers, if we sound like a little zealous about this, right? It's because Brother Christopher and I have been doing this for so many years that we remember the limitations that we used to have. We remember we had to make dogs do things. We just had to make them do it. And of course, we love dogs, and I like to think that we're subtle trainers. So we got very good at it. But the new methodology that we have written up in this book allow both of us to enjoy the dogs and for the dogs to enjoy the training more than ever. I would say the average dog that we train, after the first few days, they don't even know they're being trained. They just think they're playing. Yeah. Because what we typically do is we interrupt what we don't like. We direct or we guide them back to something that we do like, and then we reward heavily for that. And ultimately, dogs, it's like they were in college and they start writing papers, compare and contrast. Compare and contrast. If I don't come and call them, if I do, well, it always works out better if I do. Mm-hmm. So, that's why they opt in. So a dog who opts into his own training is so much more fun to train. So do we use food? You bet. But the key point is to use food in a really targeted way. In a laser strategically. Absolutely. Yeah. So that ultimately you can fade it out and you don't get dependent or hooked on it. And also too, not every dog loves food. They don't all care about food. And so for those dogs, we always want to find what motivates them. For some dogs, it's scent. For some of the hunting dogs, we want to take them to where the good scent is. And if they recall them, we take them back to where the rabbits run. For other dogs, it's just praise. And so we may carve out a moment in the middle of the training session for a belly rub. We're always looking to motivate a dog to trade us what we want for what they want. But the end goal is the dog should be safer and better trained so that she can go more places with you. So she can attend the soccer games when those come back. So she can sit at an outdoor cafe with you. So she can come to the bookstore with you and so forth.
Thank you. There's a question here from Meg as well. She's wondering if you address in the new book about training two dogs at the same time, or multiple dogs.
Chris, you want to field that? Or
yeah, I can respond to that. Not directly, okay? However, what you can do is train each dog individually, and then you can incorporate that in, for example, walks where you're using a device that is called a coupler that allows you to walk two dogs at once with a leash. And I'm saying this because generally speaking, most communities have leash laws. So regardless of whether your dog is trained in a way where it is off-leash reliable, still, if you are in public communities that have leash laws, you're going to be doing a certain amount of walking with your dogs. I assure you, it is much easier to walk two dogs with one leash and one remote transmitter that can communicate with each dog. And that's entirely possible to do that. However, the one thing that I would simply say is in the training process, it's best to work with each dog separately. However, then when dogs are, for example, playing together or going on a hike together, absolutely you're going to be able to apply the training to the situation in that context.
Thank you. I got a private message from a attendee who is concerned about the shock collars and or the e-collars, and I put that in the chat if anyone wants to see it, and I'll read it here as she wrote it. Hello, I've read your book and met dogs worked and met before dogs and met dogs who worked on the shock collars. You mentioned your book, so I'm familiar with the tools and also the fallout and risks. How do you justify promoting methods and tools that are not only advised against by the American Veterinary Society for Animal Behavior, but the leading dog training organizations, and are banned in 9 countries without explaining the risks of these tools? She was shocked that this was not addressed thoroughly. Sorry, I'll just finish. Sorry, she was not. She was shocked that she was not addressed thoroughly in the book. The dog training industry and the animal industry in general are moving towards Lima, L-I-M-A, and even Petco has made the move away from shock collars, acknowledging that they're not tools meant for the average pet owner. In light of science and industry standards, why are you insisting on promoting these methods as first step training when there are simpler and more effective methods to use that do not require adversities and are more affordable and easier to train the owner? And she says this not only as a certified trainer, but as a certified teacher with a master in education who's familiar with learning theory. And she's also confused about saying they're not punishment yet aversive. How is it this both?
Yeah. Listen, we understand the controversy because if you take me back 15 years, I was violently against this stuff. But the reason is that the evolution in technology had not occurred, right? So there was only one kind of e-collar out there. They were nasty and they were unusable, but the technologies has evolved incredibly. So what I would say is why do we use it? Because it works. Why do we like it? Because it's gentle. We had to invent the methodology that matched good new technology to make it work. But what I'm going to say to this person is you haven't seen our work. You haven't. And if you would like to, I'd be happy to share some video with you of what it looks like when you're training a dog on an e-collar. I mean, our dogs literally come thrust their faces forward so they can get their e-collar on and go do their adventures. So what I would say is you're laboring under you're laboring under old information and old technique, old technology and old technique. So while truly a thing is outdated, it is not the new stuff. What we have here is the new stuff, and our eyes tell us what we know to be true, which is a dog does not lie. If a dog is having a bad time during training, they are certainly going to let you know about it. And we're getting happy dogs to off-leash reliability in 3 weeks. And I challenge you to do that any other way, because I've never seen it done. And I've been training dogs for 50 years now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would add to that, and certainly I'm sympathetic to any trainer who's aware of how e-collars have been misused with various dogs. That's precisely the reason why we wrote the book in the first place, is to set out a method that we believed would be able to use this tool in a revolutionary and optimal way. And we back that up with our own experience. Here at the monastery, naturally, the last thing that I would want to introduce into the training program is something that I felt was injurious or harmful to the relationship between owner and dog. In fact, when I first began to realize how the technology had changed and how this tool could be used in my own work, I was sort of faced with an ethical and moral decision. If I believed that using an e-collar could actually not only help the training process, but also have it done in a gentler and I think in a clearer way, did I not have an ethical obligation to integrate that into our work here at the monastery? Well, I believed that I did. And despite the fact that I knew some people would be very horrified that the monastery was now using e-collars and advocating them, because of my own experience as a trainer, you know, I too have been training for 40 years. I really was aware of how things had changed. Now I realize, I think Mark and I both realize that this is a very divisive issue, a polarizing issue in the dog training world. There are trainers who would not have anything to do with e-collars versus trainers who couldn't think of ever going back. And so what we have really tried to do is present a very, what we think is responsible and clear approach to using this tool in its most effective way. As Mark had said, the toothpaste is out of the tube. Okay, e-collars are going to be present and become even more sophisticated in the years to come. Doesn't it make sense to present an approach that will help people not only understand them, but use them in a very effective way?
Thank you, guys. There's a follow-up in the chat from Alyssa. In the down exercise, if the dog comes up, you use the collar on a constant tap along with collar pressure from a prong or the star mark until they return to position. What is the learning theory behind that if it isn't a punishment?
Well, you know, this is just argumentative. So I don't really want to address it. I feel like it's argumentative, and I'll tell you what I mean. The average person who tries this with a dog is not going to be thinking about the science. B.F. Skinner never trained a dog. So what I'll tell you is that if you guide the dog back into the down position with a tap on the shoulder that says, that's the moment where you did it wrong, do this instead, the average dog very quickly says, oh, I should wait here for you. So it's not confrontational. It's not hard on the dog. We're not taking the dog off its feet. We're not cranking up the collar. So this is what I would call more like guidance. But, you know, there are people in the world who feel that any time that you physically mold a dog into a position that you are being cruel, and I'm just here to tell you that's extremism. It's that's extremism, but it has very little to do with what we do.
One of the things that I would add to that is the fact that if we're holding the dog accountable to what it understands, okay, that's presumed that we have initially taught the dog the exercise in a very clear and gentle way. As we said, we're introducing this and the particular exercising using food reinforcement so that the dog understands each command, as it were, each exercise, before we're quote unquote helping or guiding them through a mistake, for example. And when we do guide the dog through the mistake back to an understanding of what it is intended to do or what it's supposed to do, we're doing so in a very reasonable and gentle way. Again, we're paying attention to the dog's body language, and the dog is able to put that into its experience. So dog training certainly involves a certain amount of legitimate holding the dog accountable to what it already knows. And I think that if owners are afraid of doing that, what they're going to find happening is the dog, as it were, taking advantage of situations and not being as obedient as they otherwise would be.
There's a question here, if you wouldn't mind my addressing it, because I think it's a little bit, it's to the point. And then, sorry, Rachel, we'll then answer anything else you want. But Rebecca asked, can you compare the success and time of traditional training versus e-collar training? And I think that's really critical, because what we're presenting in the book is a 6-week training program, which presumes that your dog knows very little. And by the end of the training program, your dog should be sitting at the door waiting for permission to go through with you, should be going to his bed or place upon command and waiting there for a reasonable amount of time, should be able to do a downstay, should walk politely on leash even if there's distractions, and should come when called, even if you've gone to a field or someplace off leash that's that's safe and legal to have a dog off leash, should be coming when called. And that's all in 6 weeks. So if you were to say, how long would you accomplish that with traditional training methods? Well, I could tell you from personal experience, it was 20 to 25 weeks, but that was if you trained twice per day, at least 5 to 6 days per week, and you traveled for practice. So 6 months versus 6 weeks. And that 6 months, that I'm really hedging it a little bit there, because you had to be a professional dog trainer to really accomplish that. The average client or amateur dog trainer never really did. And I'm talking about recall off of deer in the woods. Mm-hmm. So that's what we really want, is to, we're not here to argue with other dog trainers. What we're here to do is to assist people who love their dogs, don't want to in any way harm their dogs, but want to liberate their dogs, who want to hike in the woods, who want to go to the beach, who want to take the dog to the soccer game and have him stay with them, in the family area, who don't want to have to lock the dog up at Thanksgiving. This is what we're seeking to accomplish. We want to liberate dogs so that they can be with you and enjoy their lives ever more. And we're doing that very quickly and easily now. So I think it's really a matter of learning the new stuff, and there is new technology, there is new technique, and it's quite lovely when you see it in person.
One of the things that I would, just noticing some of the questions that have come on chat, one thing I could clarify really quickly is all of the e-collars that we discuss and recommend in the book are waterproof, okay? So that you don't have to worry about your dog getting injured or hurt if it jumps in a lake with an e-collar, or, for example, in an ocean. And then another question was, if a dog or a set of dogs is 2 to 3 years old and has been trained conventionally, but, for example, the training has regressed, is it a lost cause? And I would say, and I'm sure Marc would agree, that not at all. In fact, we work with dogs all the time who have had a certain amount of training to start with, but the owners are often dissatisfied with the results for various reasons. And using, for example, a 2-dog unit, according to the program that we're presenting in the book, I'm very, very confident that a dog who is 2 or 3 will easily be able to quickly get up to speed and sort of get to that point that the owner dreams about.
I think the oldest dog that ever came to my boarding school was 13 years old. And in fact, that dog was very remarkable, I thought, because, well, first, you might wonder, why would somebody send a 13-year-old dog to boarding school in the first place, right? And I had to ask the same question of the owners, but they explained she was a rescue dog. They knew she was in her golden years, but they were really afraid she was going to harm herself. Why? She was not only deaf, but she was also blind from birth. And this dog was so clever and so wonderful and so smart, but she would amuse herself by doing destructive behaviors. And one of her favorite things to do was to open their oven and work on pulling the lining out of the oven. And I didn't even know that ovens have linings, but sure enough, I did a little research. They've got a metal lining, and if you separate it and peel, you can like yank it out. And they were so afraid that she would do it when the oven was on or hot. She was messing around the stove area. They were afraid she'd turn on the gas and explode the house, in the middle of the night. And that worked out just fine. So old dogs certainly do learn new tricks. We do it all the time, and so can your dog. A question that comes up all the time is, if you train with an e-collar, are you married to the e-collar? Are you going to have to use it for the rest of the dog's life? And the answer is no. No, we train with an eye on engaging the dog's desire to cooperate. We're not shoving anything down a dog's throat. We do most everything with really enticing body language, treats, praise. That's just as important as anything else that we do in this particular book, in this training program. And then eventually we start to think of the e-collar a little bit like training wheels on the bike for a kid. They're there to help stabilize, to build the muscle memory, to understand what it is you have to do in any given situation, but eventually they go away. And so it is with the dogs. We train and talk about in the art of training your dog, how to train with an eye on fading the e-collar first back and then eventually out. But I put my seatbelt on when I drive the car. So if you're going to take the dog into the woods, I think it's a good idea to, put an e-collar on, even if you throw the remote control in your pocket and never touch it. And the reason is you never know when the perfect storm of a deer or a rabbit or something might come around. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's entirely to the point, is that when you're in off-leash situations, dogs aren't robots, and you want to be able to respond to any kind of spontaneous situation that happens unexpectedly. And with the type of training foundation that your dog has had, you'll be able to do so safely and without an awful lot of, how would I say, strong arming the dog. In other words, it will be much more of a guidance type of thing.
Well, Marc, Brother Christopher, I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been a fascinating and wonderful event. And thank you so much for joining us and talking about your new book, The Art of Raising a Dog. Oh, The Art of Training a Dog. I'm confusing your things. Sorry.
We've got The Art of Training Your Dog, and we recommend that you get a hold of it from
Northshire Bookstore, please, and shop local and shop early. The Art of Training Your Dog from Brother Christopher and Marc Goldberg of the Monks of New Skete. Thank you all so much. This has been terrific.
Yeah, thank you for having
guys.
Thank y'all both.
Okay.
Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you again at another great Northshire Live event coming up soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.